Hey guys, it's me, Will Chandler, back doing another video. Thought I'd try to make a video while I was feeding these little guys, which is easier said than done as far as feeding them goes. And anyway, I want to talk about the topic of guilt and being raised as a Jehovah's Witness and the guilt that comes along with that, and just some of the just the effect it has on you. Um, I mean, just starting simple as a little kid, rather for something like playing with He-Man figures from being second grade and having an indoor recess and uh, somehow got ratted out. I think it was my older sister looked in and saw, but playing with He-Man figures at indoor recess at school one day, and getting in trouble for that, and the guilt of that as just an action figure. A lot like Sparlock. My mother was a very extreme Jehovah's Witness. If she was, I mean, she takes takes things to the extreme. If she was Muslim, she would be a suicide bomber. I mean, that's just seems to be who she is when it comes to religion. Yeah, come on, little guy. And also something like playing Cowboys and Indians. Guilt over that. Never mind all the daily stuff of am I doing what God wants? Am I, staying in His favor as a child? You hear all these things, and then something like playing, you can feel guilty over that and get in trouble over that. Another thing, I finally had a friend over. I was in maybe fourth or fifth grade. I had a friend over for the first time, but what we had to do was I planned it out with him. We had to pretend to have a Bible study first, and then he would be allowed to uh, then he would be allowed to stay and we could play afterwards. And so I remember feeling guilty about that. Like, am I doing something that is false worship, token service to God, And of course, all because of this false religious cult. Another example. Uh, I had an uncle that died when I was around 10, give or take a little, and I was inconsolable for a while. He was actually more like he was the proper father figure for me. And I remember being beaten by my stepfather, my Jehovah's Witness ministerial servant stepfather, because I was too upset over my worldly uncle dying. So I got beat over that. So it's not okay to be upset for worldly people dying either. That's the takeaway on that one. Let's see. Another one. Oh, it's a good one too, right? When I around 15 or so, it's before I had completely proved the Jehovah's Witness cult to be a false religion. Um, I really would find my peace in nature, my peace where I'd be most happy, um, and that's where I found God. A lot like the line from the Gospel of Thomas, where lift a rock and there you'll find me, split a piece of wood. Or for me, it was out in the mountains, in the woods. That was where I found my peace. That's where I felt the my strongest connection to a higher power, to God, was seeing His creation, much like this bunny here, right? Like looking at this, it's hard to not see a creator. And so when I brought this up to my mother about feeling like I found God in nature, and I brought it up. I was careful how I worded it. And of course, my mother, goes on this little rant about how someone believing that is a paganist or a pagan and it's not in line with God and all this other stuff. Because if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you have to find God with the governing body, and that's it. That's your only approved channel. Even though if anytime you hear something like God's channel or the channel for God or the channel to a higher power, channeling, channeling. It's Spiritism. Spiritists, of course, we all know about the links between the Jehovah's Witness and Spiritists, especially their Bible, Johannes Gruber, all that fun stuff. It's highly, um, the Jehovah's Witness cult is highly, highly, highly involved and based off of Spiritism, even though the rank and file doesn't realize it. Anyway, so um, another time of feeling guilty. When we lived down in Texas, I was 14 years old, and I was baptized at this point, and it has given to me to call on this young married man. Him and his wife been having problems. He had been having some interest in the Jehovah's Witness cult, and so he was given to me to call on and try to study with. And during the course of it, the course of a few weeks to a few months, it ends up coming out that he had been beating his wife. And so I talked with him about that and tried to help him see how that's not exactly a loving arrangement. And you can see there's genuine, he had a genuine struggle with that as far as he knew it was wrong and claimed to love his wife, yet he still did it. Um, and his wife's father found out about it, and come on, guy, told him that if you hit my daughter one more time, I'm going to kill you. And of course, a few weeks go by, but then he does end up getting drunk and beating on his wife again. And a few days later, um, he was at a party and someone walked up behind him with a gun and shot him in the head. And so then at 14, here I am feeling guilty because it was my responsibility to bring this man into the so-called truth of this false religious cult. And I felt guilty for a long time. It was I mean, just think about being told at 14 that you're responsible for this man's life. And then he gets his head blown off because you failed. That was placed on me by the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses as a 14-year-old baptized brother in their congregation. Also, when I had finally, another thing of guilt, when I finally had moved on, when I finally proven that the Jehovah's Witnesses was a false religion biblically. Come on, guy, you gotta wake up to eat. I had a severe amount of guilt for years about leaving my sisters behind. They were finally safe. My mother had left my stepfather, and um, they were finally safe from his abuse. And about a year after that, I left because I knew it was a false religion, and I couldn't. It was either that or go live on the streets. Either leave to go live with my father and stepmother, or it was to go live on the streets because I could not live a lie. It's something I just couldn't do and refused to do. But then I have a huge amount of guilt about leaving my sisters behind with my mother. My older sister, she had come to rely on me quite a bit. and I'd become kind of like a father figure to my younger sister. And after I left, in particular, I felt a lot of guilt about my older sister because she just fell apart. She almost died a couple times from anorexia, just because of the cult, because of the Jehovah's Witnesses. She just couldn't handle it, and she couldn't handle what had been done to our family because of the direction. It was direction from headquarters, from the headquarters in New York. It was their direction that helped to further the abuse of our family. And um, she just didn't seem to be able to handle that. I gotta switch out bunnies here. And so that's a lot to have put on you as a kid, let alone an adult. And I'm sure any sane person out there can realize that it's definitely not right. This guy's active. Let's see. Let's see if he takes this. Oh, that's my nose. Sorry about that. So, sorry about that. I'm pausing. Might not have been the best idea to try to do a video while feeding the rabbits. I was trying to do two things at once here. So I felt guilty about my sister almost dying because I felt like I left and I was her support structure, and so I put that on me. If she had died, I'm lucky that she made it through it, but yeah, I had a guilt of that for many years. And then of course I felt guilty, even though I had proven that a false religion, still that cult programming, that cult mind control was still there, to where even though I left and I was sure, I was 99% sure it was a false religion, um, that little doubt, that little tickle in the back of your mind because of the cult programming of, well, what if they were right? What if I am leaving God? What if I do die at Armageddon? And to me, I was kind of like a dead man walking at 16 when I left, but I couldn't live a lie. And it took a long time for me not to have doubts. Now I have no doubts whatsoever. I'm sure it is a complete lie. But I mean, I'm sure there's dozens more examples I could think of over time of the guilt that is placed on you, and it's all a means of control. And if it wasn't the cult leaders doing it, it was my stepfather who was a pedophile, who was my rapist, or it was the elders in the congregation, or it was my mother, or I mean, and it all goes back to Jehovah's Witnesses. That's where, they say all roads lead to Rome, right? Well, all guilt leads to the governing body. And so that's probably about it for this video on guilt and Jehovah's Witnesses. And I still end up placing too much of myself a lot of times to this day, but over the years I've worked through most of it. And I just wanted to share that so that other people going through the same thing, they know that they're not alone. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll end it there for now.